This is Tyrese Halliburton, and you're listening to Setting the Pace.
Look, setting the pace with Alex and Facci. Alex and Facci, Alex and Alex. If I put our jacks in the paint, how you gonna stop me? How you gonna stop me? We can go head to head. Call out your top three, call out your top three. Look at the swish from Duarte. Now that boy got three. We got Halliburton running point. This is the Benedict for the shot. If anybody gon' come in the post, then we got Jalen Smith for the block. Setting the pace, going to the top. Setting the pace, going to the top. This is your number one podcast. Sweeping every team, we gon' need a mop. Smooth.
All right, everybody, we are here to talk top 10 trade targets for the Indiana Pacers, and me and Facci both have come up with 5 names each. Maybe I'm going to sneak one in there for 6. That means I am just giving you a heads up. So it is going to be technically a top 11, but we'll just do top 10 because it sounds better. But if you're watching this on YouTube, thank you so much. Hope you hit that subscribe button. Let us know what you think. We really appreciate all of the feedback on there. If you're just listening to this on the normal podcast app that you listen to us on, thanks so much for joining us. You already heard our first segment talking about the Pacers-Celtics game, but let's get into it, Facci. Who do you got first on your list?
All right. Number 5 on my asks for, to Pacer trade targets. I'm going Jaden McDaniels on the Timberwolves. At 6'9", this man is lengthy, and he can defend multiple positions. And when I say multiple, I'm talking about he spent last year 25% of his time guarding power forwards, about 20% of his time guarding two guards, 20% of his time guarding small forwards, about 20% of his time guarding point guards, and 10% guarding centers. So he can do a little bit of everything on the defensive end. This is someone who has aspirations of being an all-NBA defender. And this year, he's averaging 11 points per game on 52% shooting, 37% from three. One thing that really caught my eye was the defense that he played on Tyrese Halliburton earlier in the year, honestly stifling him when the Pacers played the Timberwolves about last month or so. So that really had me intrigued. Don't know if the Timberwolves would be interested in letting him go. Actually, one of the players they did not want to include in the Rudy Gobert trade, but if there's an opportunity to get him, I think he'd really fit this team.
Well, that was going to be my rebuttal to this whole, why would you put him on your list?
Well, I mean, I'd like to see your list because I guarantee you got some players that I would be like, this guy's not going to be available. So if you really think he's not going to be available, one name, I'll throw you a little consolation over here because these guys are fighting. One guy that will be far more available, Obi Toppin. Obi Toppin right over here.
That makes more sense.
Yes. And he was the first guy that made the cut. This is a guy that needs a change of scenery. Right when he was drafted is right when Julius Randle took off. So if you're ever to look at just the sheer numbers perspective, they're not going to jump off the page, but Obi Toppin could jump out of the building. The former National Player of the Year, this man is very athletic. He's about to turn 25, which in NBA standards is not the youngest, but he's by no means old. And at 6'9", he could play the 3, he could play the 4. I truly believe his best basketball is ahead of him. And given what the Knicks are doing right now, I don't think they're going to be rushing to re-sign him. I do think he could be available via trade.
Okay. So we're going to end up doing our top 12 then, I guess, since you gave an extra
Maybe
one.
we are.
Yeah, I mean, Obi Toppin to me makes more sense. I was curious about McDaniels just because the Timberwolves, like you said, they refused to include him in the trade for Rudy Gobert, and pretty much Utah got everything else they wanted from Minnesota in that trade. I think they highly covet him and what he meant to that team last year in the playoffs. I love him. I would love to have him on this team, but just doesn't seem like a realistic option where I think Obi Toppin does. And, me and you talked off air about some of the names that I had on my list. I didn't put those guys that I felt were unrealistic, that were reaching for the stars, right? Those are ones you make a call about, and hopefully you get lucky like you did with Tyrese. We're like, okay, really? That he's available? Okay, we'll take him.
Still shocked that happened. But guys, right when we logged on, I went real quick, got to know one player. Do you have Jaden McDaniels on your list? And you're like, no. And I was like, all right, I'm making, that was the push for me. So that's why otherwise I had Obi in that original fifth spot.
Yeah, so Facci doesn't really know much of the guys on my list. I just told him to send me his, and I was trying to make sure I had enough guys to do mine. So I'll move on to my first person on my list here, and this is at the bottom of my list. A name that we've talked about probably for 2 or 3 years now as a guy that we're all kind of like we're interested in his game overall, but I think we both have kind of soured on him a little bit. But it's Rui Hachimura, okay? We just saw today that Mark Stein said the Phoenix Suns and Wizards had a trade conversation where the Wizards were going to send Rui Hachimura to the Suns for Jay Crowder because the Wizards are believing in this team for whatever reason that they're going to be more than a first-round playoff exit. I don't understand that, but, Rui Hachimura is a guy that he's 6'8", he's 230 pounds, and he's a power forward. The Pacers desperately need somebody like this. He's only played in 16 games this season, Facci, but in those 16 games, he's averaging 11.6 points per game, 4.8 rebounds, and 1.1 assists on 48% shooting from the field and 33% from three. The big reason why, and you're going to see a common trend here with a lot of these guys on my list, he's entering restricted free agency this season, and the Wizards could go in several directions. If they want to try to win, maybe you can sell them on a win now guy. If they want to kind of go the opposite route and decide, hey, we're just not going to be a good playoff team, we can sell some of our pieces. Maybe he's another guy that they're like, we don't want to pay him any money, we'll get rid of him. The Pacers can get his bird rights then, and then look to negotiate a deal with him in the offseason because they do need a power forward, like you mentioned, Obi Toppin. So Rui Hachimura, not like somebody I'm in love with, but I would understand if they went and made a small minor move to try to get him off the Wizards. And maybe all it would take is giving up one of your Cavs or Celtics picks to get him, to be honest with you. With the way this Wizards team is going, you get him on your roster, you give him a chance to kind of show what he can do. I know there's a logjam right now with this rotation, but I think the Pacers want to take a risk on some younger guys, and he's a guy that can make sense.
First off, I had to contain my laughter and make sure I didn't laugh in the mic because the Wizards thinking that they can push forward and add Jay Crowder and do something is just like one of the most pathetic things for a franchise that, Alex, believe it or not, has never won 50 games in their existence. All right.
You would know that as a fan.
I lived in the area, so I got a lot of friends that were Wizards fans.
Right,
and,
a lot of friends.
They've stopped watching basketball because it's gotten rough over there. Really, a former top 10 pick, someone that you and I were both high on. I just don't understand what happened. I really do think that the Wizards do not develop players well. There's guys that we've seen that have taken a long time. There was a Troy Brown Jr. never really developed over there. Now Rui's kind of been stuck in the same. Johnny Davis does not look like he's doing well over there.
Tell me a draft pick they've had that's been like really good. Bradley
Honestly,
Beal's like the last one.
Yeah, and Beal was the third overall pick. Kelly Oubre Jr. was a decent guy that materialized as a rotational NBA player. Anyway, Rui needs a change of scenery. It sounds like the trade ask for the Wizards is not much.
Mm-hmm.
I think that his best basketball should be ahead of him. He had something going on last year that really delayed, something personal that really delayed him coming into the season. So, this is someone who I'd be willing to take a flyer on because I don't think that he's blossomed as much as everybody hoped. But a top 10 pick that is still very young over there, that's always appealing. He's 24 years old. Yeah. I would be intrigued if the price is right.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we know Bob Barker, the price is right. So if it is right, I think that's a right move. But let's move on to your next one, Botch.
My next one, hey, I love taking a good flyer on someone who hasn't hit their potential. James Wiseman. Now hear me out. So this man was as talented as they come going into college. I believe arguably the top overall recruit, if not top 2 recruits. Extremely talented, but raw. That raw talent was good enough to get him as the number 2 overall pick after playing just 3 games in college due to a scandal, unfortunately. But injuries have plagued his first 2 seasons, but he's still just 21 years old. Offensively, super gifted, and I'll tell you, I'll even put it in perspective. He's only had 3 games all year where he's played above 18 minutes, and just the other night against the Nets, 30 points on 12 of 14 shooting. Offensively, there's never doubted him. Defensively, he's got a long way to go. Golden State, while they develop players well, they don't have the time to properly develop him in real games. So I do think that if they want to continue to expand their window of winning it all, James Wiseman might be their ticket. to bringing in more established players. Plus, Alex, selfishly, if we want to go Thanos mode on the NBA, this is our chance to collect the 4th lottery pick from the 2020 NBA draft. And James Wiseman is still under contract next year at $12 million per year. My assumption before anyone says, whoa, another center, I imagine Miles Turner would be going back in probably any deal plus a little something extra.
You don't have to say that, man. Don't get the haters or the stands mad at you here by throwing his name in the trade rumor, okay? I mean, it makes sense, but don't say it. Save yourself. I'm trying to help you. I'm looking out for you, man. I'm looking out
Appreciate
for you.
it.
No, I just don't think James Wiseman has it, Facci. And
he might not.
That's just my opinion. It's like, I understand the Pacers are kind of a team that makes sense to take a risk on him, but I just don't want another project right now at center position.
Project.
He's a massive project, and is there playing time for a project? I mean, do we really think that he's going to be better than Jalen Smith and Isaiah Jackson at this point? From what he's shown so far in the NBA, I would say no. And if he's got injury history, that's something else I'm concerned about. If it's not going to cost you much, I don't mind using him as kind of like as a salary filler for the Warriors when they have to try to find salary to match up to try to trade for somebody. I mean, it's not the worst idea at all. I'm not trying to debunk that. I just wonder, is he the type of center that we want on our team and with the style we want to play? Because, there's another center out there that's cheaper than him. He's a little bit older than Miles Turner. It's Jakob Poeltl. That's been on the trade block all season long. And I kind of thought he could make some sense for the Pacers because of his ability to rebound the basketball. And he's a good screen setter, decent, pretty good defender as well. But he hasn't taken one three-point attempt this year. It's like, is that really his game? Is he going to fit what the Pacers want to do? And that's where I'm kind of like, no. I thought about putting Jakob Poeltl on my list just to kind of be different, but I'm like, he's just too different from what they have and what they're trying to do. And I wonder if Wiseman kind of falls in that same boat. If he's going to be, I don't know, do you think he's a guy that can play fast?
Well, that remains to be seen because he's a guy who still needs far more playing time to really develop. Yeah. But for Jakob Poeltl, I believe he's entering free agency after this.
Yeah, he
season.
is.
So
he is.
I don't want to trade for anyone that's on an expiring deal because what it costs. Yeah, exactly. But for Wiseman, I mean, man, rarely do young guys at number 2 overall pick become available, and this is an interesting situation. I think the Warriors, while they developed talent really well, it was not the best spot for a team that's looking to win it all with a guy that is a bit of a project. I know what they were trying to accomplish in the pick, but I don't think that he was the right pick for the Golden State Warriors. I'm curious to see where he ends up because right now he just needs playing time. And in the midst of a rebuild for the Pacers, this is their opportunity to take a chance on someone if it does not cost too much, but there are most definitely questions about if he will ever live up to who he was expected to be. Probably won't, but there is still untapped potential there.
The second pick feels like a curse a lot of times in the NBA draft. Chet Holmgren hurt already this year. Go back a couple of years ago and you got Marvin Bagley, right? The guy that's not even been able to get much playing time. Maybe a little bit there with the Pistons, but they're so bad it doesn't really matter. Then you can even go back even further and look at a guy like Evan Turner. Like he didn't turn out to be what everybody thought he was going to be. So nothing against Wiseman. I feel like there's a chance Darko Milicic has a better career than James Wiseman did.
Oof. I mean, look, I hope not not that I'm.
That's where I'm at belief Wiseman.
But yeah, I mean, if we even want to go back, Marvin Williams was just so very Michael Kidd Gilchrist. I mean, Kidd Gilchrist is the definition of the ugliest shot, but the most average player out there. Sam Bowie, back in the day, there's the number 2 pick is just, it gives you some strange results. Yeah, so, hey, I'm ready to move on to your next target. What do you got?
Yeah, so I've got somebody that probably a lot of people aren't thinking about, but I've got Kenyon Martin Jr.
Ooh,
6'6", 215 pounds, small forward of the Houston Rockets. He started in 6 of the 31 games this season, averaging 10.7 points, 5.1 rebounds, and 1.5 assists. 55% from the field, but just 31% from 3. An incredibly athletic wing who can defend well and has a high motor. You can tell he does fit what the Houston Rockets are trying to do with their style of play, their faster pace type of thing. I think he's got a little bit of an edge to him, Facci.
He does.
kind of got some shades of his father in him. High flyer, not afraid to rough it up with some guys. And there's been talks about how he wanted to be traded, I believe, if not mistaken, at the beginning of the season. And I think Jake Fisher reported that, the Rockets are looking for a first-round pick for him.
Really?
Similar to what they want for Eric Gordon. Like, it's a similar package. So I don't know how obtainable he is, but I think if there's a way, the Pacers and Rockets have made trades in the past. They have a history of doing that. Obviously, the Karis LeVert, Victor Oladipo whole thing there that went down. And, of course, they made the trade before that where the Pacers took on, like, two guys or whatever, like Nick Stauskas and somebody else, and waived them. So, they've made trades with the Rockets before. Kevin Pritchard, Chad Buchanan. Seems like they have a good relationship there. I think if Kenyon Martin Jr. somewhat becomes available, the Pacers have to knock on the door and say, hey, what would it take? And I think a 6'6" kind of guy like that could make a lot of sense. And I believe he's entering free agency this season. So, yeah, it's a bit of a risk with that, but he's young. And I think if he fits in well here, he could be a really nice piece with whether it's Nembhard running the second unit or Tyrese running the first unit. Whoever he's playing with, I think he could be a lob threat to a certain degree, even at 6'6", just because he's got so much bounce.
Does have a lot of balance. That's someone I've been very intrigued about. I went to West Virginia University. He was rumored to go over there because his dad was coached by Bob Huggins. So I've been following him since high school. And I think when he ended up just making that move to go pro after high school, I was really surprised about that. Ended up, instead of going to college, I forgot where he played, but maybe it was the G League, whatever it was not going to college. I thought that was a really bold move. Ends up being a second-round pick, and he has continued to get better and better. Not a name that you hear about, not someone who's going to be dropping, 30 points, 25 points, anything like that, but he's going to give you just energy and just nonstop, a little bit of everything. So, man, the fact that he does hit free agency, being that he is a second-round pick, makes me kind of just hope we could sign him outright. But if the price is not much and it's getting towards the deadline and Houston feels he won't re-sign, sign me up, because this is someone that fits that young culture of what the Pacers are trying to build. And I think that he's someone who does not need the ball in order to be effective.
Right. And that's why I'm really intrigued by him. It's one of those guys that doesn't get talked about that much, but when you watch him play, you're like, man, this guy's got something to him. Like there's good attributes that you want on your team that he has, good intangibles. And I think the Pacers are just missing somebody like this on their roster right now. Just give me another athletic wing type of player that can go out there and just muck it up for a little bit. It doesn't have to be a starter. And that's kind of like probably where you're like, oh man, Alex's first two guys aren't getting me very far in terms of starting minutes. But I'm trying to be realistic here. I'm trying to look at ways the Pacers could be effective with their trades.
Yeah, exactly. Look, you're not going to find a Jason Tatum on our list. All right, those players, they're just not. They're not. I hope not, because we might be debunking that real quick. But look, those players don't always become available. But every now and then, you get really good role players, guys that maybe haven't hit their potential that become available, or you get guys that are a bit more established. And that's kind of what leads me into my next guy on the list, a guy that we hear is available, and a guy that the Pacers actually passed on by one pick to draft a guy whose name rhymes with CJ Beef. All right. And this guy is John Collins.
Okay. I was like, where are you going?
Yeah. John Collins ends up, I didn't want to say the name of the real guy.
Don't say it. We're good. We know it.
I'm going to leave it at that. But John Collins is someone that I wanted the Pacers to take years ago, but he's not having a John Collins type year, but he is still a matchup problem. For 3 straight years, he essentially averaged 20 and 10 on 55% shooting, nearly 38% from 3. I mean, he's a guy that, never been something to really write home about defensively. He could still give you a block per game. But on the offensive side of things, say the Pacers were to move Turner and you could slide Jalen Smith down to the 5, have John Collins at the 4, or you can move Ijax to the 5. Whatever you want to do over there, the Pacers still have options to make it work. I think that Tyrese Halliburton is a far more of a playmaker than perhaps a Trae Young right now, that I think could get the best out of John Collins, because Tyrese doesn't need to look for a shot as much as a guy like Trae Young does. And if anything, this is the buy low type of situation for John Collins compared to recent years where he flirted with being an all-star. He's also signed for the next 3 seasons at roughly $25 million per year. I know it's nothing to, think is a bargain, but it's not anything substantially in the 30s. But this is also a Pacers team that has cap room and will have more cap room moving forward. What's your thoughts on John Collins?
Let me ask you a question because I want to follow it up. You bring up the contract. You don't think that's too much money for John Collins for what you're trying to do with your rebuild?
It's more than a lot of people would feel comfortable with, but it's also not like a max contract by any means.
Yeah, no, I get that. And I did talk about this a little bit last week with Eddie Garrison when you were in Washington, D.C. for vacation. And it's one of those things where I'm not like opposed to it, but I don't love it either. I like John Collins. I do. The money does put a little bit of a damper on my excitement to get him. And I think because he's regressed a little bit, not a good defender. He's been okay, but like not good. I mean, I'm trying to be nicer by saying he's been okay. Just not been a very good defender. Nice offensive player. But I just wonder, do the Pacers need more offense or do they need more defense?
Definitely more deep.
And that's kind of like, but you can never have too much talent. So if he's that talented of an offensive player, yeah, you kind of need a go-to guy to go with Tyrese and Benedict or whatever, just a guy that can get you the ball in the hoop. But I'm just curious, like, I haven't watched a lot of John Collins film probably since 2 years ago when he was playing really well in that run that they had to the Eastern Conference Finals. But I think he's got upside for sure. I would not be opposed, like I said, to them making this trade. I would actually be intrigued a little bit to see what he could do. But at the same time, I just wonder if it's the right move for the Pacers. Is this the right guy to spend some of your free agency money that you're going to have on? I mean, is this the guy that you want to invest in? And that's kind of where I'm like, I'm hesitant.
Yeah, I mean, does John Collins get us over the hump for a ring? No, but does he make us, more of a consistent playoff team? I'd say, yeah, probably. The money right over there, it's nothing to say this guy's on a bargain deal, but I do think that he is someone that is realistically available, and the Pacers do have the assets to do it. Do you go all in on John Collins? Absolutely not. But that's also why the man is number 3 on my list and not my top target. But overall, I think we're both in agreement. If the trade happens, sure. If it's an overpay, probably not a good move.
Yeah, so I'll move over to my number 3 quickly here, and I think this is something that I would take over John Collins based on the contract and based on what they do stylistically with their play, and that is Jared Vanderbilt, 6'9", 214-pound power forward out of Utah. The Utah Jazz have him there. Got acquired in the trade for Rudy Gobert. He started in 30 of 32 games. He's averaging 8.6 points per game, 8.2 rebounds per game, 1.2 steals per game on 57% shooting from the field and 39% from three, Facci. Jared Vanderbilt, while he's not putting up a ton of points, he's shooting the ball effectively. So I really think the Jazz could pivot from where they're currently at, and they could sell some of their pieces. Now, what pieces do they sell? I do not know. They have been a surprise team as well. Everybody expected them to be at the bottom of the barrel of the Western Conference, ourselves included. We just did not see this team going anywhere, specifically once they traded Donovan Mitchell as well. So you trade Mitchell and you trade Gobert, and you traded Royce O'Neal and Bojan Bogdanovic, and you revamped this entire roster and put a bunch of guys together, and it's just kind of worked. I think they've found something there with their head coach. I think Danny Ainge is probably surprised that they're off to as good of a start as they are, because we know for a fact that Danny Ainge is not afraid to make some drastic trades to blow it up and go out there and rebuild like he did with the Celtics when he got Marcus Smart, Jason Tatum, and Jaylen Brown. I mean, that was a terrific job by him to kind of blow it up. So with Jared Vanderbilt, there's a good chance he becomes available, and the Pacers could swoop in there and try to make a deal work where they get him from the Jazz. Now, I don't know what it's going to cost you, but that's not the exercise we're doing here today. We're just throwing out trade targets. But I will say this. We know from previous experience, Danny Ainge is hard to deal with, and Danny Ainge is going to want some good assets for Vanderbilt. So it's going to cost you probably something of good value to get him. But I do think that Vanderbilt has the tools and the skill set to be a part of this Pacers team moving forward. And he could be potentially a missing piece that they have at that 4 spot.
Hey, definitely someone that they rave about his defense. I mean, he's definitely not that sexy household name that someone's going to be like, hey, let me get a Vanderbilt jersey. But at the same point, he's going to be contributing to winning basketball. And I think that would be a good move. But yeah, I mean, is Utah going to try and ask for something crazy like a first round pick for him or anything of the sort? I don't really know. But, I do think that he would fit the culture of this Pacers team
for sure,
if available.
I think I saw in Jake Fisher's article, the most recent one, that he did mention Jared Vanderbilt's name as someone that could be, I guess, could be in discussions. Maybe it was 2 weeks ago when he put that article out, but it was something I remember they talked about, like his name could be involved in trades. Obviously, 8-8's not jumping off the page at anybody. Like, oh my God, all-star. But like, this is a guy that could have a Thad Young level of impact on this team.
I mean, hey, we do love some Thad Young, and that impact is needed on any team. Or maybe we'll just have to have Jake Fisher back on the show to crack the case for us. But
Absolutely.
Number 2 on my list, if we want to talk about sexy names, this one, we got Jonathan Kuminga. Now, look, there's going to be some people that are like, what? There's no way Kuminga is going to be available. But he's 100 times better than what his numbers state, because this guy actually has star potential. But he's 7th overall pick. Some nights he plays 30 minutes. Some nights he plays 5. It's a Warriors team that's torn between trying to win it all and trying to develop young talent. But he's at one point, he's going to want a bigger role. He's going to want a bigger contract. They just paid Andrew Wiggins. They just paid Jordan Poole. They probably got to find a way to move Draymond Green out of there. Otherwise, I don't know what's Kuminga's real path to being an established player over here. If he had went a different route other than the G League, he might have ended up being a top 3 pick. Instead, he goes to number 7th overall, and sometimes where you land really dictates, kind of your future in the NBA. And I think this is someone that is still very coveted amongst other teams. So I think in the right situation, he could be really excelling, taking off like some other players in his draft class. But man, he could play the 3. He could play the 4. He's 6'7". He's just 20 years old. I think this is someone that would immediately fit into the culture of what the Pacers are trying to do, but he wouldn't come cheap.
So this is a guy that I had on my list that I did not include because you had him on yours, and I said, keep him. That's fine. We'll talk about him. I had enough names to talk about other players where I'm like, okay, we can talk about Jonathan Kuminga together. And yeah, I'm all in on this one, Facci. If I would have made my list, he probably would have been my number 1 target to go after, because I believe in him that much. Now,
I do.
You said the Warriors are kind of stuck in trying to figure out if they want to play their young guys or win. They got to play their young guys to win, because they don't have enough talent on their roster, in my opinion, to not play them. Now, James Wiseman is not someone that they're going to be playing a lot, but Moses Moody's been getting some more opportunities now, and I think it's just been kind of an up and down year for him, for sure, more down than up. But Kuminga, we saw what he can do defensively, right? This guy is so good defensively. And one thing that we didn't even talk about yet is Bob Myers' contract is up, and that has not been renewed. So we'll have to see what they do there with their president of basketball operations or general manager, whatever his title is, the decision maker there of the roster building. Do they keep him around, or do they not like that he's put so much money into the guys like Jordan Poole, Andrew Wiggins? Draymond's coming up, and he already makes a ton of money as it is. So there's been some speculation that Draymond might want to go to the Los Angeles Lakers in the offseason. We'll see what happens there. The Lakers, depending on what they do and how much room they have. But yeah, I think this Warriors team, like you said, they're not going to want to trade for a guy like Miles Turner, even if he does help them for this year, because he's extension eligible. They're not going to give up a guy like Kuminga for a 1-year rental on a guy that they probably can't afford to keep unless they decide that he's worth every bit of the money and they move off of a guy like Jordan Poole, or they move off of Andrew Wiggins. I mean, they're just got a lot of questions, and they have a lot of money invested into their good players. So, if the Pacers can somehow weasel their way in there, get their hands on Kuminga, and bring him back to Indianapolis, then I will give them I'll do whatever I can to praise the Pacers for that one. I mean, that'll be the best move they've probably made in franchise history, just because of how difficult that's going to be, because I guarantee you there's 28 other teams besides the Pacers that want Jonathan Kuminga and would trade a lot to get him. So, this is one of those things where Kuminga's not, to me, someone that's close to being an all-star right now. But give him 3 to 4 years, I think you're looking at a guy that could be a potential all-star.
I completely agree. I think he absolutely has all-star potential. But, man, this is one of those situations where it's hard to tempt Golden State with the Celtics and the Cavs picks. Like they're not like
What,
they're not-
Duarte? You loved him in the draft.
they did love Duarte, so I do feel like you Duarte's got to be in there, and so does some of the other young talent on this Pacers team. Probably the Pacers' own first-round pick has got to be in there. The unprotected. It would get expensive, but I do think that Kuminga is someone that you got to be willing to pony up assets for how young he is and what he's bringing to the table. So, man, hey, let a guy dream, because him with this Pacers unit, with Benedict Mathurin, with Tyrese Halliburton as obviously the untouchables on this team, I would be extremely intrigued to see what the next few years would look like. But hey, that's why I got him on my list, and I'm curious to see who's next on yours.
Yeah, so for number 2 here, Facci, I've got a 2-for-1 special for you here.
Ooh.
And it would not be an Alex Golden NBA trade list if I did not have the name Paul Jermaine Washington on my list.
Yep.
AKA PJ Washington of the Charlotte Hornets, but I'm also including his teammate, Jalen McDaniels. Look, the Hornets, they're a team that a lot of people speculated they could be in the Wembanyama sweepstakes. They've not played great. LaMelo's come back. They've looked a little bit better since LaMelo's come back. I know they had a big win against the Kings on the road. I believe it was Monday night they had that victory. And they have some veterans there with Rozier, Plumlee, Hayward, and they're an okay team, right? That when they're healthy, they're okay. When they're not healthy, they are terrible. And we saw how bad they were when LaMelo Ball was out. They desperately need somebody else there. But this is where I think if the Hornets decide, okay, we're going to go into rebuild mode, they have to ask themselves this question. Paul Jermaine Washington, PJ Washington, is a restricted free agent, which I said is going to be a recurring theme with a lot of my players here. Do we want to pay him big money? The whole Miles Bridges thing kind of screwed with what the Hornets were thinking about doing. I think they would have kept him. They probably would have been a much better team had he been able to play and hadn't got into everything that he got into. So they have PJ Washington. I think he's someone that's played well. He's averaging 14.3 points per game, 4.8 rebounds per game, 2.3 assists. But this is where it's kind of gross. Only 40% from the field and 32% from three. It's his lowest numbers of his entire career. And I think part of that is just the team that he's around. Kelly Oubre Jr. is on the team as well. I forgot to mention him earlier. But, it's just not a great fit. And I think a change of scenery for him would be huge. I think playing with a point guard like Halliburton would open up some opportunities for him. I like his ability to play the small ball 5 if possible. But at the same time, I just, like you said earlier with Rui Hachimura, how much is it going to cost to re-sign him? I'm not paying him out the wazoo, but I would give him a decent amount of money. So I like that. Someone more of a flyer that you could take it's Jaden McDaniels' brother, Jalen, a guy you mentioned earlier. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, I don't necessarily think Jaden's a guy that could be traded realistically, but I think Jalen is. 6'9", 205 pounds. He's played in 32 games, started in 10. He's averaging 10.8 points per game, 4.7 rebounds per game, 2.2 assists. But this is where I like it. He's shooting better from 2, 45% than PJ, 35% from 3, which is average.
Yeah.
90% from the free throw line. Mm-hmm. So pretty good free throw shooter. I think either one of these guys would be really helpful to this Pacers team. Don't think it would cost you a lot to get either of them, but it's going to cost you something. I just think these are two guys that could help this Pacers team, and I would be willing to see what it would take the Hornets to pry one of these two guys up, if not both.
You and I have had a man crush on PJ Washington for quite some time. We wanted him back in the draft, knowing that he wouldn't be there. But so it's just like there's always been that like intrigue of like, oh, well, and I still remember maybe it was his rookie year, maybe it was his second year, he dropped like 42 points, and I was like, I believe. And now I just think what's going on in Charlotte is just like infectious in the worst way. I just think I don't want to say the culture, but whatever they have going on over there, it's a bunch of guys that seem to be kind of playing individually rather than playing as a team. And I do think he needs to get out of Charlotte. So, and then for Jalen McDaniels, I also think that he's a really promising young player that could be available for pretty cheap. For Charlotte, I don't know if they're going to re-sign PJ Washington, which makes me feel that he is very much in play to be available. But yeah, for whatever reason, the last couple of years have not been too friendly for him. So I thought that he would kind of take off a little bit more, but there is still that intrigue of like, hey, if we can't develop him, who can, because the Pacers have done a good job developing young talent, and he definitely falls into that mix. He's someone that I got it pulled up right now, 24 years old. Look, just turned 24 a little while ago. Still very young with good basketball ahead. So if the price is right, like Bob Barker said, like you mentioned, count me in.
Fits the bill. And I think another thing, too, you get his bird rights. That's a big thing here.
Yes.
We've seen the Pacers go after restricted free agents, last season with DeAndre Ayton. It didn't work out because obviously the Suns were able to match it. But with as much cap space as there is for the Pacers, most of the guys that are intriguing this year in free agency are restricted ones. So you have to wonder if the Pacers would be willing to do that, or if they try to get ahead of the awkwardness of restricted free agency and trade for a guy that is upcoming for free agency and go out and make a trade, because you don't want to go out and get a guy that's expiring, like we talked about on the last show with Kyle Kuzma, right? He's not going to come back here, or if he does, it's a big risk.
Yeah.
When it's restricted free agency, you have control of their bird rights. So let's just say, for example, a team with some money, let's just throw a team out there like the Pistons had some money and they wanted to pay PJ Washington $16 million a year, okay, for 4 years, whatever the deal is. The Pacers can say, okay, we'll match that. We like $16 million. We think it's a fair price. Now, if the Spurs were like, we'll give you 27, the Pacers were like, okay, take them. We don't want that much.
Yeah.
I'm just throwing out examples, but that's kind of the nice thing about having the bird rights is you can make a decision on, okay, do we want to match this? Do we not? And how open would he be to playing here if we do match it? That kind of thing. But I just feel like these two guys are guys I'm always going to be fans of no matter where they're at in the league.
Yeah, if you're trading for an expiring contract, you better be making a playoff push. And I just don't see the Pacers doing that this year. So guys that are entering restricted free agency, I do think is far more beneficial for the team.
Yeah.
Now, number one on my list, this is not going to come as a surprise because I'm not backing down. I mentioned him a couple of episodes ago.
Oh, wow.
OG Anunoby, the 6'7" wing right now is exactly what the doctor prescribed for these Indiana Pacers. He's averaging 19 and 6 on 47% shooting. He is a true two-way player. A wing is everything that the Pacers need. He leads the NBA in steals, and this is someone who I mentioned it a couple episodes ago. Every single year he's improved in scoring, rebounding, steals, free throw attempts, and his defensive capabilities. He's still guaranteed under contract through next season, and at just about $20 million has a player option in 2023. 2024 probably ends up declining that, I would imagine, based on his play. But what worries me is that we heard his trade package could be big, Donovan Mitchell-esque. I don't know.
That's so dumb.
It really is.
That is the stupidest thing I've heard.
Because what are we doing here? Everybody needs to cost 5 first-round picks. Even if you haven't made an all-star team before, even you look at Rudy Gobert and the Timberwolves, they overpaid too much for that. That can't be the trade package for every player that becomes available in the NBA. But we know Toronto's in trouble. They're just coming off of a 6-game losing streak. Where are they going? They're stuck in the mud right now. And you want to get out of that? A guy like OG could be your ticket to, going in a completely different direction. Alex, a guy can dream, but you tell me. What do you think about this pairing?
In the words of Steven Tyler, dream on, baby.
Yeah, it might be.
I'm dreaming with you, though. Dream until your dreams come true. He also said that. So I'm dreaming on, baby. I'm dreaming until my dreams come true because I would love OG Anunoby on this team. He is a fantastic fit. If he can stay healthy, he is a missing piece. He is clearly a missing piece. This team could totally change the trajectory of where they're headed if they got him on the roster.
He's the definition of one. You look at him, you plug him in as the 3 on this team, all of a sudden, obviously some guys got to go, but we're cooking with a core that can really elevate each other, and still they all fit the timeline.
Him, Benedict, and Tyrese together in the backcourt. You can't find a better 1-2-3 punch than that. And then the ability to play smaller with him at the 4, potentially. Put Andrew Nembhard in there because we know how smart Nembhard is, or Aaron Nesmith, or whoever. There's a lot of optionality here with what you could do if you get a guy like OG Anunoby on this team. I have absolutely loved watching him since college. He kind of came out of nowhere in college. It was this guy that super athletic, and you can tell how much he's developed his game over time. And the injury stuff is a little bit concerning just because you want to make sure you're going to get a healthy OG Anunoby for the majority of his career, which I don't think we can bank on that. But like you said, the Raptors are in trouble. OG Anunoby is a perfect fit for this Indiana Pacers team moving forward. Slam dunk here. This is a 100% I agree with. I didn't put him on my list because I knew you were going to have him on yours. So
Had to have
didn't
him.
even have to write him down because I knew you were going to have him. But I love it, and I hate that I went last because mine's going to be so anticlimactic compared to your OG Anunoby pick.
What do you got? Another Jared Vanderbilt-esque player or what?
So I've got someone that's a little bit older, 26 years old, will be 27 in March. So he's the same age as Miles Turner. It's Cameron Johnson from the Phoenix Suns. Now, I've talked about him on a couple different podcasts where I've been intrigued by him, and he's only played in 8 games this year, Facci, because he has an injury.
Mhm.
Now, he's supposed to be able to come back from that later this season. Not sure exactly when, but in that stretch, Facci, 13 points per game, 3.4 rebounds per game, shooting 45% from the field, but 43% from three, and 73% from the free throw line, which is not great, but it's not bad. Restricted free agency, okay? This is once again where I'm going out with this. We did it last year to the Suns. Are we going to play spoiler and do it again? Are we going to mess with the Suns? Because they've already extended DeAndre Ayton. They've already extended Devin Booker. They've already extended Mikal Bridges, and Chris Paul is not a cheap contract either. So that's going to be another expensive contract on their hands if they go all in with Cam Johnson. I think what happens in the playoffs will be easier to understand how this team goes moving forward. Do they make drastic changes if they get bounced early in the playoffs, or do they try to bring everyone back together if they make a good run? And I think both options are available, but we just found out this week, Robert Sarver sold the team to a new owner, a billionaire, and he bought the team for $4 billion. Excuse me, I don't have his name up here. If you know what it is, feel free to shout it out. I know he played at Michigan State when they won the championship. That's about it. But there's been talks that he wants to bring in front office people. Now, does that mean that he's going to replace James Johnson? Does that mean he wants them to be a part of the front office with James Johnson? A lot of questions. Why do I keep doing that?
Because we got James Johnson, so it's just
no. I've done it 3 times already this season in podcasts. Killing me. James Jones. Yes, I'm sorry about that. Thank you
for Pacer.
Yes, former Pacer. I see the face and I say the wrong name, and I've done it. I did it on Twitter. I've done it on here twice. Oh my goodness. James Jones is the general manager of the Phoenix Suns, maybe president of basketball operations, whatever the title is. But he's the one making all the decisions over there for him with their roster construction. If they bring in somebody to go with him or to take his spot, could that mean they feel differently about Cameron Johnson than he does? And I think that's where you kind of have to look at this and just think to yourself, this is a guy that could really help the Pacers if they're able to get their hands on him. I think he's a good defensive player, shoots the three well, and I think he's still in his prime. So it's going to be huge to get a guy like this. Would he want to come here? It's tough saying. But, nobody probably thought DeAndre Ayton would want to come here too at this time of, in December last year. So never say never. I think he's someone that could make sense, but I would much rather have Kuminga or OG Anunoby than Cameron Johnson. But if I'm trying to be realistic, I feel like Cameron Johnson might be a little bit more obtainable.
Cameron Johnson should be more obtainable. If it was Robert Sarver, who had been labeled as cheap for a long time, I do think that Cameron Johnson would probably be the guy that ends up being let go to sign elsewhere. Now that they do have a new owner that is a big basketball fan, maybe he is willing to spend more money than Sarver was. But Cameron Johnson was someone that I was surprised when Phoenix made, I believe they traded up because they traded up with Minnesota, picked him 11th overall. I remember being like, whoa, that feels like a reach. But he's been a really good player. He has, and he's been a sniper in the NBA. So he's been a really good three-point shooter dating back to his days at UNC. But man, you know what? If the Pacers are able to make this work, interested. But what does he want to get paid over there? What do you pay a guy like this? I don't know what his
probably wants $20 million a year.
Probably wants $20 million. What's his next level? Because, he's averaging 13 in 8 games. Last year, he averaged 12 and a half. Is he a guy that's kind of, 12 to 15? Or is there a next level that he could grow while his contract grows? That's where I'm wondering about, because he feels like a very good complementary player to a team like Phoenix. But if he's on the Pacers and we're paying him $20 million, we kind of need him to be like a fringe all-star type player. I don't know if he's got that in him.
I think he's more of a fourth option on your.
Yeah, I'd say fourth at best, probably.
He's a 3-and-D kind of guy. That's kind of how I view him. But 3-and-D guys kind of cost that.
Oh yeah,
You could kind of almost compare what he is to the Suns to what Aaron Gordon is for the Denver Nuggets when they're fully healthy. Like Michael Porter Jr., Jamal Murray, Nikola Jokic, your top three.
Yeah.
Gordon is the huge pivotal fourth piece right there. Defensive stopper that they put their best player on. I don't know if he can be a guy that defends the best player 1 through 4. I don't think he's as talented defensively as Aaron Gordon is, but what I'm trying to get at is like that's kind of his role. He's like the fourth option for a team, and he can still put up points when they need him to. I believe in him a lot. I think he's a good player. How he comes back from this injury is going to be key. Not really known as an injury-prone guy. This is one of his first injuries that I can really recall. I might be wrong on that, but with the Suns already having Ayton and Booker and Paul and Bridges, it's kind of like he was coming off the bench last year. Jay Crowder was starting, and then they eventually started him in the playoffs over Crowder at points. And that's kind of what led to Crowder being upset with not liking his role and wanting to be dealt. So I just wonder, like, they seem pretty high on him, and the Suns aren't always high on everybody. So the fact that they're high on him and believe in his potential, I kind of am too, high on his potential. But at the same time, limitations for sure. I mean, it's going to cost you a lot of money no matter what to get some free agents away, especially restricted free agents. You're going to have to pay a good amount of money to get them away from their team. So you probably do have to overpay and offer them around the $20 million range.
Yeah, that's a situation where, you imagine if you end up trading for him, which whatever that costs, and then you pay him $20 million, you're pretty invested in Cameron Johnson, really pushing this team forward. I wonder if he has that in him, but I do think, hey, look, I'd be interested in the player, but when you're talking about cost for the trade and then free agency, I might feel a little bit better if we can just outright sign him in free agency.
Yeah, and that's what it might have to be, is just sign him in free agency once he's restricted and see what you can get. But if you can trade for him earlier, it does potentially help you. Or if you have his bird rights, you can at least do a sign and trade. And that also maybe gets you somebody else in the mix as well. But with that being said, Facci, that wraps up our list. We're not going to go through and repeat it all, but I was curious, did you have any honorable mentions that you want to throw out as guys you left off your list?
Nah, I was really just torn between Obi and Jaden McDaniels for that spot, so I'd say I mentioned mine. What about you?
Yeah, so a couple of names I had written down that I didn't even bring up. I was just kind of spitballing here. One was Isaac Okoro. You said, thank God we don't have him on our roster last week. And I'm thinking, well, if we could take a flyer on him for pretty much nothing, that'd be interesting. Another name, Sadiq Bey. He's been out there in rumors quite a bit. I would be interested in Sadiq Bey as well as a defensive guy. One guy that I almost put on here over the Wizard I did put over here was Rui Hachimura. I thought about putting Denny Avdia.
I thought about that for like a quick instance, and then I kind of backed off of it. Exactly. Good defender.
Yeah.
Real good defender. Just the offense, it just never caught up really what people hoped when he was a top 10 pick, I believe.
Then my pipe dream that I said I wasn't going to get into like what I gave to you in a text message via like a trade idea. But a guy that if the Bulls decide to blow it up and just go a completely different direction, if they're stupid enough to trade this guy, I think you have to make a phone call to see if he's available. That's Patrick Williams. Now, sometimes I think the idea of Patrick Williams is better than who Patrick Williams actually is.
And I agree with that. I definitely agree with that. 4th overall pick. This guy, I mean, it looked like he could really be a potential all-star. Has not taken that step, but I know the Bulls love him. I know other teams love him. Yeah, I think he'd be a little bit more expensive to get when you're still just kind of almost similar like a James Wiseman thing where you're banking on that potential, but what you give up could be far more than what you get in return.
Yeah, and that's kind of how I feel about him. So I'm like, I wanted to put him on my list as like number one, is like, oh yeah, think about this. Like you can go after Patrick Williams, but it's like, you told me it's probably unrealistic when we were chatting about it. So I was like, okay, I'll back down from that. But the price might just be too great. The price might not be right. Bob Barker might not be approving this one, Foch. But yeah, so there we go. That's the honorable mentions that I had mentioned. So with that being said, let the people know where they can find us at on social media.
Absolutely. So you can find us on Twitter at SettingThePace3. You can find Alex on Twitter at AlexGoldenNBA. I can be found on Twitter at _FACCI. You can find us on Instagram at Pacers Talk. You can find us on Facebook at Setting the Pace. You can find us on TikTok at Setting the Pace. And Alex, tell them where they can check us out on YouTube.
Go to youtube.com/Setting the Pace, a Pacers podcast, where you can watch this video. If you haven't already, subscribe. leave us a 5-star rating and review over on the podcast app as well, wherever you're listening. But comment, let us know what you think of our list, because we want to hear from you. And if we missed anybody, throw those names out at us as well. But Facci, if you're excited that Tyrese Halliburton had an all-star level game against the Boston Celtics, the number 1 team in the Eastern Conference, and you love Terry Taylor live tweeting the games, then say these 3 words.
Let's go Pacers!
Setting the pace, going to the top. Setting the pace, going to the top. This is your number 1 podcast. Sweeping every team. We gon'